How come that we cannot find these? We have descriptions, accurate descriptions only after the British came. They have written all this, unforgettable descriptions. She said in India, there was a kind of an unofficial ban on this. In classical literature, you don't describe this kind of thing. You take it out of the wooden frame and then using a sharp splinter or the sharp edge of a leaf, you keep on scraping off layer by layer of the dead, of the cadaver. Now, when the one layer is peeled off, then the next layer. That is how you see the interior. This was the first time, and these two British doctors who were watching this, they wrote a report accurately with figures. That was published in London in a gentleman's magazine, which is a very important journal at that time. They published there. That is how this became known in Europe, that there is an operation like this from India.
Gajanana Padmarkam Gajanana Maharnisham Anekadantam Bhaktanam Ekadantam Upasmahe. Namaste. Welcome to Atharva Forum. Today's topic of discussion is Acharya Sushruta, testimony to ancient India's achievement in surgery. So, we will be in conversation with Dr. M.S. Valiathan, the renowned cardiologist who was awarded Padma Vibhushana for developing indigenous low-cost heart valve in India. Welcome, Dr. M.S. Valiathan, to Atharva Forum. He has written three great legendary books on the books called Brihatrayi, Charaka, Sushruta, and Vagbhata. So today we have Dr. Valiathan with us. Welcome, Dr. Valiathan, to Atharva Forum. Namaste. So we have many questions to your Acharya in this forum. I hope all the questions will be answered because many of our interested learners want to listen a lot from you. Sushruta is considered as the father of ancient Indian surgery. Now my question is, wasn't there surgery before Sushruta? Because when I was reading Ayurvedika Brihad Ityas type of texts, I found that in Rigveda there is a mention of Ashwini Kumaras treating a queen whose leg was broken in a war, and they placed it back. So such type of surgery related discussions are there in Ayurvedic text, just Rigvedic text. I'll just read out that mantra. Charitram hi verivachedi parnamaja khelasya paritakmyayam sadyo jangham ayasim vishpalayai dhane hite sartave pratyadhattam. Jangham ayasim means the iron rod was placed in place of the original leg. So my question is, was there no surgery before Sushruta? Why is Sushruta called as father of surgery?
That's a good question. I am aware of this reference in the Rigveda, but for us, a more direct way of looking at the historicity of the surgery in Ayurveda is to look at what Sushruta himself said. When he was taken along with the 5 other classmates, they approached Divodasa Dhanvantari, the king of Kashi, who was their Acharya. There is a discussion on surgery. They were very eagerly welcomed by Divodasa to learn surgery. But there is no reference at all to Rigveda. They only talk about Dhanvantari as the originator of Ayurveda. In fact, the Dhanvantari system as opposed to Atreya system, there are 2 broad streams in Ayurveda. One is the Atreya system, which is the medical way of treating, and Dhanvantari system, which is the Dhanu means a weapon. So Dhanvantari system was the other, pioneered by Dhanvantari, who is, as you know, the legend is during the churning of the ocean, Dhanvantari came with Amrit. Now he is the founder. There is no reference to the prosthetic replacement in the reference of Rigveda in this. So throughout the discussions in the Sushruta Samhita, there is no reference at all. But it is good to remember Charaka, he says, not related to this, But in one place, Charaka says knowledge always existed. When you say its origin, it only means the systematized presentation. That is what qualifies as origin. But the knowledge existed even earlier. It is quite possible something may have been done. But when you talk about surgery as a discipline for teaching, for practice and so on, it dates back to Sushruta.
So it means that Sushruta is the first who has brought this whole surgery procedure in a very specific format. Can we call that?
Format, not only the diagnosis and treatment by surgical means, but also teaching. As you know, he originated the experimental way of teaching. If you want the students have to practice surgery, instead of practicing the very first time in patients, they are given various fruits, for example, or torn pieces of cloth to stitch. So various manual procedures in surgery. So a system of teaching surgery, that was pioneered by him. So it is a whole system that is learning, the theoretical part of it, the practical part of doing operations, and the teaching by experimental means, and also the dissection. All these were pioneered by Sushruta.
Now, as we are talking about the surgery part of Sushruta, now another question which is directly connected to this. There are many complicated surgeries explained for various inner parts of the human body. These days we have the scanning and all, and through scanning or through x-rays we can understand that there are some specific parts of the body which is affected from various problems or tumors or something. So was there something similar to that in the time of Sushruta, by which he used to diagnose the patient that in this inner part of the body is suffering from this ailment or something?
Sushruta was very much aware of the anatomy of the body, the interior of the body, how to visualize it. In fact, he says a surgeon must learn anatomy by doing dissection. But in those days, in India, the touching the human body was considered defiling. There was a lot of taboo attached to touching the human body, leave aside cutting it with a knife. So the method in Sushruta Samhita they followed was take a dead body, put it in shallow water and let it rot for 3-4 days in a dark place where not too many people come, should be a lonely place. And once the body begins to soak, begins to rot, then you take it, it is soaked in a wooden frame. You take it out of the wooden frame and then using a sharp splinter or the sharp edge of a leaf, you keep on scraping off layer by layer of the dead, of the cadaver. Now, when the one layer is peeled off, then the next layer. That is how you see the interior. But this was a very imperfect way of doing anatomy because many internal organs would have rotted away. You might not see anything of that. So only for the hard part, the bones, cartilage, teeth, etc., there you could see reasonably accurate anatomy. But soft tissues, especially muscles and so on, you might not get an accurate description. He was aware of this. But the social conditions were such, you could not take a knife and cut the human body. They would create all kinds of opposition. So what they did was, wherever there was, for example, warfare happening, a lot of people, severe injuries, they have chest injuries, for example. The whole chest is open. And in taking these, there was very little they could do by operations and all that. But they could observe how the heart was there, how did it look, the pumping of the heart, the lung. They could see many of these things during war injuries. Second was accidents. Often in the Sushruta Samhita describes, a lot of the surgical procedures are done in trauma. People falling off the trees, falling off the crush injury under a chariot and so on. So all these accidents were regional anatomy of the limbs, for example. All these they could observe. And thirdly, sacrifices being done in animals. That was another source of information. They could see the similarity in the anatomy between the hamans and cattle, for example. So they could see the soft stomach, the colon, all these. And this is not anything new, because in the Atharva Veda, Ayurveda, as you know, is dominating in Atharva Veda. A large number of hymns, they relate to, there is one sutta all devoted to the wonderful structure of man in Atharva Veda. That is all about anatomy. They even talk about trachea, of the esophagus, stomach. All these are mentioned. So that anatomical knowledge, not very accurate, but even from Atharva Vedic times it existed. But there is no question that our anatomy was imperfect. And so therefore, the surgeons had to be very fast, very quick in doing procedures. There was no anesthesia. And if you had to keep on dissecting to find out the anatomy, the patient wouldn't tolerate it. So they had to have a decisive hand and very quick decision making.
So, whatever you told means learning about anatomy was like that. It was being done in the people who are actually dead or who are in the war core, etc. But in case if some person had a tumor inside the body, he looks healthy from outside, but how did what was the procedure of knowing whether that person had tumor inside the body? Was there any such procedure of understanding that such person has a tumor in his brain, or there is a cancer or something like that?
Physical examination was part of diagnosis. So, for example, if in the abdomen, if somebody had a tumor, a good clinician can see it, he can feel it, and if they felt there was a tumor, and if his symptoms related to the gastrointestinal system, they would connect it. It is either part of the gastrointestinal system, this man has a tumor. That is all they would know. There was no way they could, symptoms of relating to the colon, relating to the frequency of stools, blood in stools, and so on. And he has got a tumor confined to the left side of the abdomen, which he could feel. They would feel that this man has a tumor in his large colon, large intestine. That was all the diagnosis they could make. There was no more detail. You have to operate on that. Yes, that is all they could do at that time.
So there goes my next question. Now, once the surgery is done, the person what was the way by which the anesthesia was administered before surgery? Oh, before surgery. No, I'm not going further. Even before surgery, now these days we have anesthesia given so that the patient does not feel pain and all. What was the way by which the anesthesia was administered before surgery during Sushruta's time?
There was no anesthesia in Ayurveda. There is no mention. I must say that it is not only in Ayurveda, in the Greek medicine, European medicine also, there was no anesthesia until the 19th century in the Western medicine. So what they used to do in Sushruta's time, these patients who were to undergo operation, surgery, they would be given large doses of wine. That doesn't produce anesthesia, but it produces a certain amount of drowsiness and some insensitivity to pain. That's all it does. And the second, they had to have very strong attendants who had some understanding of surgery and the necessity for steady strength holding a patient during surgery. That is always emphasized. So these were the two things. One is wine, and this is exactly what was happening in Europe also. Strong attendants. And thirdly, the surgeon has to be very quick. There is no time for him, a slow surgeon taking his own time. He could not operate in those days. He had to know exactly what the problem was, where to make the incision, because you don't have a chance to change the incision. If your approach is wrong, you cannot close it and make another opening. That's gone. So you had to be precise in what you were doing, and you had to be quick in your technique. So these were the conditions in those days.
So in the same series, the next question will be: once the surgery is done, was there any analgesic given after the surgery to kill the pain of the person?
There is no specific, large number of oral medications are mentioned, ointments, kashayas, and so on. This was largely left to the physician, but there is no specific, like morphine, for example. I have not seen any reference to that, but I assume Charaka has, as you know very well, there is a chapter on medications used in surgery. There's a separate chapter. Now there, an experienced Ayurvedic physician, he would probably know there would be some which could have potency in the post-operative period. That could have been administered, but I couldn't tell you which that medication is.
So I have been reading, when I was reading this Ayurvedic text, I found this shloka in Sushruta Samhita, Samadosha Samagnischa Samadhatu Malakriyaha Prasannatmendriya Manaha Swasthaitya Vidhiyate. As you know, this is the definition of the healthy person or health something. So I have seen that no other text, when I was reading other texts also, this complete definition of health, I have not found anywhere else. Only Sushruta I found this complete definition of health. Even WHO, I heard that they came up with this type of definition of health only in 1960s somewhere. So can we say that the complete health was given only by Sushruta? What are your views on this?
You know that samya, the state of samyata or equilibrium in the translation. Now this was also mentioned by Charaka. For example, Charaka talks about dosha samya, dhatu samya, agni samya, ritu samya, hetu samya. All these put together is samya. That is the state of health. Now that is exactly the same, but I would give Sushruta priority because Sushruta lived much before Charaka. So this was an ancient concept in Ayurveda. Because Ayurveda, there were acharyas before Sushruta, like Kashi Dasa, Kashi Raja, Divodasa was there. He might have been saying this, how do we know? So there were, one teacher had a precedent. So we can't say it is Sushruta who invented this. This must have been a traditional belief in Ayurveda that if you have all these diverse elements of the human body, if they are all in equilibrium, then that is health. So certainly I would give priority to Sushruta in this because he lived before Charaka. But Charaka says exactly the same thing. That is samyata, equilibrium. Yes.
Just to, as you said that Charaka, Sushruta is before Charaka. What is the base of saying that this Sushruta was before Charaka?
There is a general agreement that Charaka lived in the 1st century. There are some people who claim he lived in the 2nd century BC, but most people seem to be agreed he lived in the 1st century. And he was a contemporary of Kanishka, Kushana Empire. And Charaka lived in his time. And there is even a Chinese book, history book, which claims that Kanishka had 2 companions. One was Ashwaghosha, the great poet who wrote Buddha Charita, and the other was Charaka. So he was 1st century, whereas Sushruta, as far as I am concerned, he lived long before this, before Buddha. And the reason I am saying this, Panini, everyone agrees he lived in the 4th or 5th century. That is before the current era. Now Panini, there are 3 references to Sushruta. In one place, these are Panini Sutras. In one place he says, Sushrutena Proktam Saushrutam. This is to illustrate something. There are 2 other references. So if Panini should refer, Panini was in Takshashila and Sushruta was in Banaras. So if the life has to be known, there must be at least 100 years. So he lived before that. The second was, Sushruta was the Jivaka, Buddha's physician. He wanted to learn surgery and he left Pataliputra. He traveled all the way to Takshashila to learn. So if Sushruta was alive in Banaras, why would he not go to Banaras? It is so much closer. Sushruta was already gone by that time. That's why he traveled all the way to Takshashila. And thirdly, most importantly for being internal evidence, Sushruta Samhita describes a number of surgical procedures, but nowhere does he mention opening the skull, a craniotomy, trephining of the skull. That is not mentioned at all anywhere. But in Jivaka's life, there are several references. In one case in particular, which is very famous, in Buddha, he was alive at that time. There was a merchant in Benares who was having severe headache, and the local physicians gave him only 3 weeks to live. And he wanted to consult Jivaka, who was a very famous physician, a surgeon, but he was also the physician of the Buddha. He was also the physician of the emperor at that time. So he had to get the permission of the emperor, Ashoka's father. And when this Jivaka did the trephining of the skull, took out 3 worms, and the merchant lived, and he gave lots of valuable gifts to Jivaka, which he would donate to the Buddhist Sangha. These are all mentioned in the Buddhist texts. So Jivaka did this operation, which was not existing in Sushruta's time. Otherwise, he would have mentioned it. So this came later. So all these 3 evidences clearly point out that Sushruta lived before the Buddha. So he antedates Charaka by several centuries. And what we have today as Sushruta Samhita, which we are always told it was redacted by Nagarjuna in the 4th century. But there must have been several other redactions even earlier.
So, Charaka may be after Sushruta. Charaka is after Sushruta, as you said, obviously. But the Charaka Samhita is actually the edited version of Agnivesha Tantra. So, Agnivesha was before Sushruta.
Yes. Agnivesha could be a contemporary of Sushruta around that time. Agnivesha Tantra, as you know, among the students of Atreya, that is the Atreya school of medicine, not Dhanvantari. Now, that school, he had half a dozen students. One student was Agnivesha. So when he finished another was Bhela. So when he finished his course, he asked each of the students, you make a presentation on what you have learned. So there was a big assembly of acharyas, of students, and each one of them, including Bhela, Agnivesha, they made a presentation. So all of them unanimously declared that Agnivesha's presentation was the best. So that dominated over all the others. For several centuries, that was the text. Throughout the Buddhist period, that was the most authoritative text of Ayurveda in medicine. We know that Agnivesha Tantra existed. It is not myth because Charaka Samhita, the most authoritative commentary, is by Chakrapani Datta. It is called Ayurveda Deepika. Now that was written in the 10th century in Bengal. If you read the Ayurveda Deepika, he directly quotes from Agnivesha Tantra. There are several quotations. So in his time, Agnivesha Tantra was available. It existed. Now it has disappeared. Nobody has seen it. But I believe it's entirely possible in the great manuscript collections of India, for example, in Mysore or even Trivandrum, great collections. We have not really looked for all the texts there. 50,000 texts are there, 75,000 in Mysore. In many of these big collections, you may very well find this. Just like we found the Kautilya Sartha Shastra. Nobody believed that actually. They knew there was a text like this, but nobody had seen it. But it was discovered by Shama Shastri in the Mysore Oriental Library. Similarly, Bhasa, Kalidasa himself pays obeisance to Bhasa's place, great dramatist of the past. Nobody had ever seen anything written by Bhasa. And that was discovered by Gadapati Shastri in Kerala, in Travancore, in 1910 or 1912. So it is entirely possible that this Agnivesha Tantra may be discovered one of these days. I hope so.
So from Agnivesha to Drudhabala, Drudhabala to Charaka. This is how the lineage...
Charaka to Drudhabala. Charaka wrote this, but within 2 centuries or 3 centuries, 1/3 of it was lost.
Okay.
So then the man who completed this restructured the whole book. That was the Kashmiri Dridhabala. That is what we have today.
Okay. There's another question which is very famous about Sushruta is his plastic surgery. Can you put some light on this part of Sushruta?
This plastic surgery, Sushruta talks about plastic repair of the nose, plastic repair of the ear, plastic repair of the lip. So he has described all these. But one of the interesting observations is the most famous operation, the nasal repair. He dismisses that in 3 shlokas, very, very brief. I'm always surprised because lancing an abscess, he describes in perhaps 10 or 12 verses, much greater detail. But here, this very important surgery for which India became famous, he has a very brief description. But it is there. In those days, ear repair was much more common because piercing the ear was a ritual. And many times this would be followed by infection and loss of the earlobe, and the repair had to be done. That operation was done much more frequently by surgeons. But the nose surgery became necessary because one form of punishment was amputating the nose. So there were patients who needed this operation, and Sushruta describes this. But in Sushruta Samhita, the repair was done by taking a flap of skin from the cheek. That's how he has describes it. And interestingly, by the time of, say, 1st century of the current era, this operation was not being done by any Vaidya. It was not being done in the mainstream Ayurveda. It had completely disappeared. Even if you look at Vagbhada's Ashtanga Hridaya or Ashtanga Sangraha, it is very, very hardly mentioned because it had already gone out of Ayurveda. It was being done by people who were regarded as lower caste. And the actual description of this, which we have today, it came through British observers. In the 19th century, there was a patient whose nose had been amputated by Tipu in Mysore, in the Mysore war with the British. A British soldier's nose was cut off by Tipu. Now this man, his name was Kawasji. Now he went to the military officer in Bombay, where the headquarters of the British Army was. He wanted leave for 2 weeks to go to Pune to have his nose repaired. So this doctor did not believe. He said, this man is telling a lie. How can you repair the nose? They have never heard this in Europe. So, but what he did was, I admire him for that. He wrote a letter to the British ambassador. Pune at that time was a kingdom. There was a British ambassador there. So he wrote a letter, Sir Charles Malay, that was the name of the ambassador. He wrote a letter to him. I am sending this man. He says he can get his nose repaired there. Please have it observed by doctors. I want a report. So 2 doctors went there with this man. And they went to this man sitting under a tree. And so he was very composed. He made him sit down. He plucked a leaf from the tree, put it on this defective nose and cut a sample of that. And he took from the forehead. This is different from Sushruta. Sushruta took the flap from the cheek. Whereas this man in Pune, he cut a flap exactly like that defect from the forehead with a razor, and he freshened the edges of that defect. And he turned it down and fixed it on that, no stitching, and with the vegetable glue, which he had prepared himself. All the no assistance. He was doing all this himself, record time, very skillfully done. Then he bandaged it with the cloth soaked in ghee and told him that you go home now. 5 days later, and he put 2 tubes through the nostrils to keep the airway open under this bandage. So 5 days later, these people went and observed again. They have found this flap had really stuck. Not healing yet, but it was stuck. This was the first time, and these 2 British doctors who were watching this, they wrote a report accurately with figures. That was published in London in a gentleman's magazine, which is a very important journal at that time. They published there. That is how this became known in Europe, that there is an operation like this from India. And a British doctor who saw this, he wrote a much larger, after he operated on a patient doing this, He published another paper. So it became known everywhere.
Thank you for sharing this beautiful history.
What is a matter of great pride? That such an innovation, we did not take it from anybody else. It was entirely created in this country. The technique, the knowledge, and so on.
Is there any place in India where still Sushruta surgery is being practiced anywhere in the world? I cannot hear you, Acharya.
Is there any? No, there is nowhere a statement that Sushruta surgery should not be done. No, there is no such statement. Ayurveda doesn't talk about it at all. All that we know is in Sushruta's time, the people who are doing Shalya is rated as #1. When they go to Divodasa Dharmatari, when he classifies the 8 divisions of Ayurveda, the very first he gives is Shalya. He gives the topmost importance. People who are doing this were acharyas. People who were making the instruments to do surgery, they were called Karma Kovidas. They were respected. They were revered. Now this respect, that was gone. There is actually a reference, people who are doing this surgery, they should not be invited for auspicious functions. So there was a sociologic kind of regression, if I may use that word. And that was something we don't know. It affected not only in this, for example, people who are making steel, the rustless steel of India, one of the great successes. Our Mauryan column, you go and see in Delhi, even today there is no rust. After 2000 years, how did they make this steel? Now that people who are making this steel, they also were condemned like this. We have very good descriptions of how it was being done in Jabalpur in those days, the steel being made by a man who was illiterate. Whenever this British engineer asked him questions, he would say, no, I don't know that. My father taught me like this. That's his constant answer. So that is a great lesson for us.
While you are mentioning, you said that Sushruta has given one shloka. For our viewers, I want to read out that shloka. Maybe that will be helpful for them in future readings and all. Vishleshitaya svatanasikaya vakshyami sandhana vidhim yathavat nasa pramanam prithvi ruhanam patram grihitva tvalambitasya tena pramane nahi ganda parshvat utkritya badhma tvathanasikagram vilikhya chashu pratisandadhita tatsadhu bandhair bhishaga pramattaha. So this is for our viewers that in Sushruta Samhita, Sutrasthana, 16 chapter, 27th and 28th shloka gives the explanation about the surgery of nose, which our Acharya Valyanathanji has mentioned. Interested can go there and read for more details. Now, Acharyaji, now you have done a many works in India after coming from foreign. One of that is indigenous heart valve. You have developed an indigenous heart valve. The TTK Chitra heart valve is one of the pioneering medical inventions from India in recent times. From one pow, can it be seen as our continued excellence in the field of medicine and surgery?
You know, the heart valve, these are marvelous structures within the heart. Blood should flow only in one direction. That is all the valve does in engineering. Blood cannot be moving 2 directions. So the valve makes sure the picture is lost. Yeah, now it's back. So there are 4 valves in the heart. Now these valves make sure that blood flows only in one direction, but they are functioning within bloodstream. They have to open and close 100,000 times a day, which means 36 million times a year. And when you make a heart valve, an artificial heart valve, according to international regulations, there should be a minimum durability of 10 years. That means 360 million times. You have to demonstrate. It will not fail mechanically. That only you can put it in a human patient. So it is a very challenging job. We did this because of necessity. Because when I went to Trivandrum, after being abroad several years, my problem was I had learned how to replace the valve because we have a lot of rheumatic heart disease, young people, especially women, and they have no choice but to have the valve removed. Their valve is so badly diseased. It cannot open properly, it cannot close properly, so you have to replace it. Now, replacement, the valves have to be imported in those days. I'm talking about late 1970s, early 80s. This was the situation all over India. Now, if you want to import this valve, our hospital, which is a government hospital, we could only buy 40 valves in a year. That's all the money we had because they are poor patients, they cannot pay. But an imported valve was 8,000 rupees in those days. I had 200 patients waiting. Now, how do I do this? 40 is what we can buy. I have 200 patients. So then we decided, why not we develop that here? It was a challenging decision. Sometimes some people said irrational decision. But I had one advantage. In the United States, where I worked for several years, I was fortunate to work with two acharyas in surgery who were not only surgeons, but they also developed heart valves. So I had learned this from them. Without that, this would not have been possible. So it took us, I had only 3 people, and Trivandrum is not a technologically highly developed place with major science centers and all that. But we decided to do it, and it took 7 years to do this. We had 2-3 setbacks. Many people criticized us. But finally, we succeeded. In 1990, in December, we replaced the human valve with this successfully. And now 1.5 lakhs of these valves have been replaced in patients in India. It's being exported. And the success for this really, the 2 things. One is the tenacity. If you have a setback, many people will criticize you. You may be very much alone, but you don't give up. You just persist. That tenacity, that's very essential. And secondly, this is a very highly complex job. It involves material science. It involves mechanical engineering. It involves veterinary surgery, number of different disciplines. All this you cannot get in one place. But all these skills are available in India, but from different places. You have to go to Coimbatore, you have to go to Bangalore, you have to go to Pune. So you should be willing to go to different places and tap their excellence. Use that. They're all willing to cooperate. I have noticed that. Because if you are doing something selflessly for suffering cardiac patients, it's not a commercial operation at all. And we are struggling to do this, you will find immediately the goodwill, willingness to help. This is what we got. So therefore, it is a national effort. The lead institution was Chitra, but it is the strength of India which is reflected in this Chitra valve. That's what we could do. In fact, Bhartrihari, there is a famous shloka, what is it? Prarabhyate na khalu, viknabhaye na dichaye. Prarabhya, viknai puna punaravi pratihanyamana prarabhya uttama jana na paritya jante. They never give up. That's the secret.
True. Yes. Even when you were speaking about Sushruta and the various surgeons, I understood that those people would also have faced these type of problems during their time. And slowly, and slowly when they came up and when it started helping the people started understanding the value of those surgeries, those medicines. Is there any instance in Sushruta Samhita which gives, or anywhere in Itihasa which speaks about surgery, story about surgery, other than Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharvaveda, in Itihasa text like Mahabharata, Ramayana, or any Kavya somewhere?
I am not aware of in our Itihasas. Some, for example, the development of the fetus, a baby in the mother's womb, that is a part of Ayurveda, which a lot of description is there, the development of the baby. Now that is mentioned in the Ramayana. There is a description of that. Garbhopanishad in the Atharva Veda talks about that. But surgery, I don't see that kind of references, except this Ashwini Devatas are doing that. Dakshas, after the sacrifice, that was stopped. And to complete the yajna, because the head was cut off by Shiva's Bhutas. So they had to have a head transplantation. A horse's head was put there. Now, this kind of description is there. But I wouldn't take it as a practice of surgery. We should not. That creates great difficulties for us. But otherwise, one reason I was told, I wanted to know, for example, take for example cholera, which was there, but Ayurveda only says Atisara. There are one or two words they are used. But there is no clear description of the fierce nature of cholera, an epidemic. 10,000 people dying in 15 days in Calcutta. That kind of a fierce description of cholera, it is not there in Ayurveda. Smallpox, literally like COVID-19 now, smallpox was like that. A viral disease, epidemics, people scared, running away from the whole place. Calcutta was empty, the descriptions are available. Now this kind of epidemics, you don't find a description in Ayurveda. I always wondered, then I thought maybe the classics, poets by Bhavabhuti and Kalidasa, maybe they have described it. There is no mention. And the Kapila Valsyayan, a very great scholar who passed away recently, I asked her once, how come that we cannot find this? We have descriptions, accurate descriptions only after the British came. They have written all this, unforgettable descriptions. She said, in India, there was a kind of an unofficial ban on this. In classical literature, you don't describe this kind of thing. They are inauspicious, they are inartistic, so they will not mention. She told me, if you want to know ancient India, if there is any literature on this, you are likely to find it in the folk literature, unwritten, in their songs and all that. If you go to the tribal villages, if you collect all their tribal songs and all that and scan that, you may find these descriptions there. This is what she told me. So the absence of these descriptions in our texts, that doesn't mean they didn't exist. They certainly existed, but they did not write explicitly.
But Charaka mentions about Janapada Udvamsa, that is actually these type of pandemics, no? Yeah. So can you just give a small explanation of what Charaka means with that Janapada Udvamsa? Because these days we are facing this pandemic situation. What is the view of Charaka in this?
Janapada Udvamsana is that only. He doesn't, Janapada Udvamsana, which he talks about, it is like a pandemic type of situation. Yes. Yes.
And as he mentions, most of the time when he says that the people get affected of these Janapada, this type of pandemic, this type of illness because of Janapada Udvamsa is actually because of doing adharma and not focusing.
In fact, Charaka's description is, if Prajnaparadha of individuals, we make our own errors. We know something is wrong, we still do it. And like smoking, people know smoking is very harmful, but they still smoke and they get lung cancer or heart disease. That is this Prajnaparadha. But if society is doing that, corruption, violence, starvation, famine, and all that, then that leads to Janapada Udvamsa. It is actually essentially human misconduct. That is the responsibility.
Dhi dhriti smriti vibhrashtaha karmayat kurute shubham. That's how the verse goes, as I remember, related to Prajnaparadha. Can we bring this surgery system which Sushruta had in present day? Is there a possibility of bringing that system again, with merging it with some of the modern techniques?
I don't think that we can bring it back. because that was done at a time when there was no anesthesia. So the whole picture has changed today. The method of diagnosis today, it is so very precise. That did not exist at that time. And many of the tools we use today, Sushruta did not have any of those. So we cannot adopt those techniques today. I think it is a great mistake. What we should do is, he originated by thinking and using skill and thinking creatively. That we should do. That we are not doing. We are now copying the Western people. We are not developing anything ourselves. So what we should learn from Sushruta is not to try to do Sushruta's techniques today. Because, for example, cataract operation, Sushruta was doing at that time, couching for cataract. We cannot do that today. There is so much better. We are looking at the patient's good. What we should do is not to revive Sushruta's technique per se. Does it benefit the patient? Is it done painlessly? Is it done quickly? Is it done safely? If the technique today is better, we should do this, not adopt Sushruta's technique. Cataract is a good example. So many of those which we should have developed in this country, but we never did anything. We talked about Sushruta, but we never acted in the way he would have liked us to act. So far, it is actually a Prajnaparadha, if you ask me.
Many such Prajnaparadhas we have done many such Prajnaparadhas related to our ancient texts. We have been neglecting our ancient texts. Our university is based on Indic knowledge system. So we are trying to bring such thoughts into the students so that they can develop those thoughts further. So as you said, the possibility is there of developing, not copying.
Right.
So this is really a very good advice for for all of us, that we should take the suggestions or we should follow the steps of our ancient scholars, not copy them. We have to try to develop whatever they have given to us. Acharya Varianathanji, for giving us insight, such a beautiful insights from Sushruta Samhita, as well as you have explained what you have developed, means indigenous heart wall which you have developed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much from Atharva Forum.
Thank you. Thank you.